BBC Radio Berkshire with the Pointer Sisters and Jump. Bill Buckley with you for another hour. Being Anne Diamond, Paul Coyer being me from 1 o'clock this afternoon. As I was saying a moment ago, 2 Newbury College students have received prestigious design awards for their end-of-year projects. They are George Collins and Christopher Prozzo. They've both won Institute of Engineering Designers prizes, and with them is Newbury College lecturer Richard Willis. So hello all three.
Hello.
How very nice to meet you. And where should we start? Should we start with you, George? What was your project?
It was the gearing system for a hydrochloric acid fluid level gauge.
So, right.
Yeah.
I'm going to nod wisely as if I understand any of that. Yeah. What is that like, and where does that go?
So it goes in a tank that stores very, very strong concentrations of hydrochloric acid. Mm-hmm. And the trouble you have measuring that kind of fluid is that it's very, very, very aggressive. So it eats into most alloys, most metals here. So the sort of challenge with this was making it out of plastic.
Right.
And
why was that particularly difficult? Because plastic is, after all, a wonderful, flexible, modern material, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it is, yeah. But the trouble is you need something that's mechanically sound as well, so something that's not sort of too soft. It has to be hard enough to sort of work for gears, yes. and also sort of chemically resistant.
Right. So that was the challenge. That was the problem. Now, how I don't have your kind of mind. What do you then do with that once you've established the need for this piece of equipment?
So we sort of draw up a prototype, get a prototype manufactured, and then kind of it's pretty straightforward. You just stick it in the acid. Yeah.
You see what happens.
Yeah, basically, yeah. If the maths all checks out and the gear ratios all work well, you can see whether or not it's going to work for its mechanical purpose, but then you just sort of drop it in the bath of acid.
But you blithely say, "Oh, well, you make the prototype." You better get that right, haven't you? I mean, how much work goes into that?
An awful lot. I mean, it took probably the better part of 6 months. You model it first in a solid modelling program, right. So like a CAD system. And check that it's going to work okay, sort of in theory, if you like.
Yes.
And then just hope that your calculations match the real world, which sometimes they do and sometimes they don't.
So there is a moment when you've got to try it out for the first time.
Yes, absolutely.
How confident or not would some, not just on this one occasion, but people generally in that situation be at that point?
It depends on what you're designing. Within this, because it was quite simple. I mean, we are just talking a couple of gears. It was mainly the material that made it complicated. I was fairly confident. But you're never 100% competent.
and was it 100% a success, or was tweaking required afterwards?
There was a little bit of tweaking, just in terms of the basic geometry of the thing. It needed cutting down here and there, but the principle of it worked well, and that's the main thing. So not a lot of modification afterwards.
And I gather it's now going to be commercially produced. Is that right?
It is, yes, yeah.
By your employer.
It is, yes, yeah. And
wow. How does that feel? That must be great.
Well, yeah. I mean, the project was designed for that purpose, to be sold. So, it's great. I'm really happy.
And these things will probably. I mean, will the others now become obsolete? Will this take over the world?
No, it's going to be a separate market.
Right.
It's going to be a separate market because it's not very. It's one of those sort of niche things. It's a very particular type of fluid, so it's a very particular application. And they don't crop up very often, so there's not a lot of research into it. So this is kind of the flagship.
But nonetheless, a niche market it might be. But when one of these things is required in the future, they'll go with your model rather than whatever preceded it.
Well, I should
most
hope
likely,
so.
Will they?
Yeah, I should hope so.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm very impressed. Now, Christopher, what about you? What was yours?
My project was the vacuum management system on the new Echelon vac ankle. It's essentially where the ankle attaches to a socket onto a patient's limb.
So this is for prosthetic
limbs, yes. Usually the main problem with the socket attaching to the stump is it's not as secure as some people would like. Obviously there's movement, causes rubbing, causes skin problems. So essentially it's a walk-driven piston. As the patient takes a step, it pushes on a piston, which then draws air out of the socket to almost pull them into it, essentially, to help secure it.
Right. Were you involved in this sort of area before? What were you doing apart from your studies? I mean, do you work for it? Because both you guys already work for companies, don't you? And
yes.
Then you have time off and you go back to college and you continue your knowledge base and so forth. So were you in this sort of world, the world of prosthetics?
No, prior to this I worked in fast food.
My word! Very briefly, doing what? Just so we get a real idea of the difference.
I worked in McDonald's. I worked on the register at McDonald's.
Right, so you weren't working for an engineering company?
No, I did 2 years doing A-levels in maths and sciences, and then got an apprenticeship under mechanical engineering.
Right, so why then improve prosthetic limbs of all the things you could have focused on for your project?
Well, essentially it's the fact that it's just more unique. You see, when you think engineering or mechanics, a lot of people, when I first started, told people I was a mechanical engineer. I got asked, do you work on cars? Do you fix cars?
Yeah.
And no, I don't. I fix legs.
Right. And unlike George's invention, this sounds like it might have a much wider application. Would that be right?
It would be a wider application dependent on the limb. At the moment, the Echelon vacuum is the only system we have that operates on with a vacuum to pull the patient into their socket.
Uh-huh.
But what I worked on was an adjustment valve, essentially, so each patient could adjust how much vacuum there is. It's not too much or too little.
Right. But if that proves as useful as we think it might, then, and now again, of course, you've got to do a test of this in the same way that George did.
Yep.
But you'd have to do it with a real person or people,
Yes.
presumably,
Yep.
would you? What was that like?
Definitely interesting to get to actually meet the people that we use our products on, the people that use our products and the lives that we're improving. So we had about 2 or 3 volunteer patients come in with their own limbs, had it fitted to them, and then my prototype was attached to them, and they sort of wore it on a day-to-day basis and gave me feedback.
Right. How long was the trial period?
Usually about a week.
Right. And what sort of things did they feed back to you?
Week per month. Sort of how useful it was in comparison to the fixed vacuum that they're used to, as opposed to the new adjustable version. Improved comfort level, improved sort of feel for the limbs. This is not real, so...
Right. And as with George, was some tweaking required based on that feedback?
Yes, my one, there was quite a bit of tweaking. So the air ratio was quite important, depending on how much air was remaining in the socket and how much had to be removed.
Now, you used to work for McDonald's, but
Yes.
you have been taken on, I think, by a company now, is that right?
Oh, yeah.
Right, so are they going to manufacture this?
I believe it's along with the rest of the other prototypes for the idea, but it is one of the main scenarios in which it will be carried forward.
BBC Radio Berkshire, the Beatles, of course, and we can work it out. You see how we chose that song specially for our guests, because we're like that. They are George Collins and Christopher Prozzo, who've both won Institute of Engineering Designers Awards for their end-of-year projects, and also Newbury College lecturer Richard Willis is with us as well. You must be jolly proud of these two.
Yes, I am. It was very difficult this year because we had a number of projects which could have been put forward, but these two actually stood out at our exhibition day, and a number of people said those projects are top class.
Right.
So we actually put both of them forward.
That's interesting. So you didn't make the decision, just you and the other academic staff on your own. You sort of got a bit of... we were talking about feedback a moment ago. Here was another case of feedback then.
Yes, our project day is open to anybody to come along, have a look at the projects.
Yes.
And we had a number of ex-lecturers there who had identified that these two projects were above the standard of the others.
What a fascinating job you must have then. To what extent are you guiding and helping them with these things they have to do?
Well, in Newbury we're lucky because the projects tend to be work-based projects. So they get their guidance from work. They actually provide a lot of that. And the job of the lecturer is to actually guide them to the finished article such that they're going to pass that unit and that they've got a professional report at the end of it.
So unlike students at a university, say, most of your students are balancing working for a company and then coming back and doing more studying, are they?
Yes, most of our students are 4 days at work, 1 day actually at college.
Right.
And they come in from 9 o'clock until 6 o'clock.
Yes.
And study then.
Right. And how are we doing generally as a nation now? Because there was this idea, wasn't there, that we're brilliant at inventing and hopeless at then marketing it. Where are we now, would you say?
I think a lot of the projects that our students get are actually taken up by their company, as these two have been, and they're developed from there. We asked our students to actually consider marketing of it and how they're actually going to manufacture it. They tend to be one-off prototypes at this stage, but we do ask them in a lot of cases to consider production of these articles.
So is that ever a compromise then? Might you have the most wonderful idea in the world if there was an obvious way to market it, or if only there was already an existing way to manufacture it easily?
Yes, we do. We very often have projects whereby the student has actually completed a very good project, but the company don't wish to actually take it on. And
Ooh, must be heartbreaking, I imagine, isn't it?
yes, it is, and the students haven't got the finances to actually take it forward themselves.
No. Well, it looks like George and Chris are going to be all right in that regard, doesn't it? But, I mean, how much would that have mattered to you, George? Supposing it was the most wonderful invention and you could be massively proud, but it was never going to see the light of day any further. Would that crush you, or could you, still get something out of it in a different way?
To be perfectly honest, it's nice. It's nice to see a project come to fruition and actually have a physical article that you can look at. But for me, it's never just about the end product. It's all about the sort of learning process, because within engineering, you're never ever going to stop learning at any point. And it's just each project is an exploration.
So doing that project then that doesn't apparently lead anywhere, you'll do something else later and you'll do it better because of that, and then that'll be the one that becomes a world beater.
Yeah.
Now don't laugh, it could happen. Come on.
I think that's the plan. Yeah.
Yeah. And Chris, what about the idea that you've got to think about marketing? I mean, in the old days, the marketing department would be probably full of a very different type of person from those actually doing the inventing. Do you embrace the fact you have to have all these things going on?
Well, in a way, it's sort of it's easier, because being the person that's designed it, made it, prototyped it, and tested it, you know more about this product than anybody else. So, in a way, it's almost easier for me to do it because I know it.
Yeah, and you wouldn't do it entirely alone anyway. There'd be
of course not. There'd be a team of people also working with me that'd help out. So,
were you saying before we started, Richard, that you're just about to retire? Is that right?
I semi-retired in July.
Right.
Yes,
okay.
That was the last group that I actually took.
Oh my! After how many years in the business?
I actually started at Newbury College 34 years ago.
34 years ago. Wow.
After being a student there for 4 years prior to that.
You're one of those teachers that goes straight back to their old school.
I didn't go straight back, but I actually took over from one of my old lecturers.
Oh, isn't that lovely?
Yeah.
So it must be a very special place for you then.
Newbury College is, very special.
Why do you love it so much that you've stayed so long?
I enjoyed the work with the students. It was working with them and getting them to perform to their best if we could.
Yes.
And that's what I really enjoyed.
Is it good at that, George and Chris, would you say?
Yes,
definitely.
Yeah. Two fans over there then. You're only semi-retired though, so you're keeping your hand in, are you?
Yes, I've still got my own training company, and I still do MVQ assessing for the college.
Right. They happen to be both boys, and you always wonder whether we are getting enough girls through these days. Is that improving?
Yes, we are finding that we've got more girls coming into...
Still nowhere near 50-50, I'm guessing.
Oh, no, it's probably less than about 5%, I would imagine.
Well,
Is it still that low? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, guys, why don't girls of your age want to do this? Why do any boys want to do this?
I don't think engineering's marketed very well. Go back to what you were saying, that we're not great marketers. Unfortunately, we're underproducing engineers in this country anyway. I just don't think there's enough done at sort of lower levels of education to sort of promote engineering
for either gender.
But I mean, engineering is. I think when you hear mechanical engineer, as Chris said, you think mechanic, a car mechanic. When you hear electronic engineer, you think electrician. I think there should be a distinction between engineering and these other equally worthy professions, but they're very different.
Very, very interesting thought to end on. Huge congratulations to both of you anyway. Well done on winning, and a happy semi-retirement to you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming in to see us today. BBC Radio Berkshire.